A lot to present.
Okay, I'm muting everyone, and Diva can unmute herself and share.
Yeah. Okay, well, welcome everyone.
Unmute. You have to unmute, Ty.
Realize that. Hi.
There you go.
So we'll start again. Welcome to our Protect the Right to Vote program. Very excited to have you all here today. And we are recording this. You should have just seen a thing on your screen so the League of Women Voters can put it on their YouTube channel. American Association of University Women is a 140-year-old organization, and some of our very first efforts were lobbying for women's suffrage in 1892. And League of Women Voters is a 100-year-old organization working to protect and expand voting rights. Both of us are nonpartisan organizations committed to open and fair elections that are broadly accessible to all. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ty Worley. I'm the Public Policy Chair for the Santa Rosa branch of AAUW. And I'd like to thank Taryn Young, our Program Chair, and Linda Heiser, and Peggy Snyder, our Zoom Master, for all of their help in putting on the program here today. And of course, our wonderful speakers. So we have three speakers, the first of which will be Diva Proto. She is the county clerk, recorder, assessor, registrar of voters. And she is going to be covering the local landscape and the perspectives affecting voting rights, access, security, and such. At the end of her talk, we will have a short question and answer section. So you need to enter in your questions in the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. The menu will pop up, and enter your questions into the chat box. And then after her section, we're going to have two women from the League of Women Voters. So Debbie McKay, who is past president and current secretary, and Karen Weeks, who is the Voter Services Chair. And I love that word services. You know, there need to be more services these days. They will be speaking on the national perspectives and legislation affecting voting rights and voting access. So again, we have a packed program. So I'm going to let Diva Proto start and introduce herself and let you know how our Sonoma County Registrar of Voters office is going.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a PowerPoint that I will try to move through quickly. All right, can you all see that? Wonderful. So my name is Diva Marie Proto, and I'm the Clerk, Recorder, Assessor, Registrar of Voters. I do have the longest title in the county. If you add some of the extras, it gets even longer because I am also the Commissioner of Civil Marriages. So, which is a fun one. We actually get to marry people in the office. So just a little bit about me because we thought it might be of interest to this group. I grew up in Forestville, California, so West Sonoma County. I was raised by a single mother with two young daughters. We were kind of the poster child for assistance. We were on food stamps and welfare, as it was called back then. She actually went back to school when we were young, and she became a teacher. She taught for about 12 years before she retired. I went to the SRJC mainly because I could live at home when I was going to school. And I also got the BOG waiver, which is a Board of Governors waiver for low-income students. And then we also have the Doyle Scholarship, which I was able to get. that and then working at grocery stores, because they liked me to work evenings and weekends, was really how I got through college. And then after that, I attended Sonoma State University in Roanoke Park. I started at the county in 2007 in human resources. We had, it was a big hiring spree. I think they hired like 14 senior office assistants at the same time, and I got lucky. After that, I realized that I was going to stay in public service. And so I went back and I got my master's in public administration. And I was hired as at the clerk, recorder, assessor, register of voters department in 2009. I started as a lower level manager and kind of worked my way up. So I got elected in 2019 or 2018, and I took office in 2019, January of 2019. So I think most people are familiar with the election landscape that we've had for a number of years. We had a traditional polling place model in Sonoma County. So we had permanent vote by mail ballot that were mailed out. People could request a vote by mail ballot for one election only. Or if somebody was in a mailed ballot precinct, which means there's a smaller number of voters, then makes sense to give them a polling place. It's under 250 voters. We would send them a mail ballot. Other than that, we had assigned polling places that could be as high as 175 to 200 polling places for a countywide election. Everybody was assigned to one, so it was not necessarily the closest or most convenient. We had to work with what we had available. So sometimes you'd actually have a location that was outside of your precinct, and there was a different polling place in your precinct that was not assigned to you, but that's because it was closer to a different precinct that we needed to have one for. All our polling places have one ballot type. So if you went to one that did not have your ballot type, you were not necessarily going to be able to vote on all the races that you were entitled to. We had a hard time finding bilingual poll workers for all our locations. And the information wasn't necessarily up to date. We had to print our paper rosters 2 weeks in advance to get them out to all the inspectors and locations. So if people registered at the last minute, you know, at that point in time, we had the hard registration deadline. So you had to be registered 2 weeks in advance. But there were minimal requirements and resources for additional outreach. So it just kind of continued the same way. In 2016, they passed Senate Bill 450. We call it the Voters' Choice Act, and it was a new model for conducting elections, really built off of, I think, Colorado and Oregon. So 5 counties implemented pilots in 2018, including our neighbor Napa. And then we had 10 other counties that implemented in 2020. So when LA joined, it pushed us over the edge. So the majority of California voters do vote under this model now. We have a lot more counties implementing for the 2022 election. You can see the map on the side there. So we have a lot of our kind of central Bay Area counties. It's getting a lot more in Southern California. A lot of the smaller counties and more rural counties have more difficult times with it. So, but they also have less people. So they have very few polling places to begin with. So the model really has a number of components. One of the biggest for people in the beginning was that all active registered voters were sent a ballot in the mail. That is now state law going forward. So that's not really part of the Voters' Choice Act anymore. We have to do it regardless. We have to have one secure ballot drop box for every 15,000 voters. We have to have one vote center per every 50,000 voters open for 11 days. So 10 days prior to the election, and then election day, of course, is the long day. This includes weekends and this includes holidays. So coming up in June, we've got, I can never remember, is it Memorial Day right before? We will have vote centers that are open on the holiday. And then 4 days, we have 1 vote center per 10,000 voters. So we add more in the short term. Voters will be able to go to any vote center in the county in order to cast their vote. The requirement for the voter's choice is that we have an election administration plan that's done with public input. We have a language accessibility advisory committee, as well as a voting accessibility advisory committee to make sure that we're reaching people and engaging communities. And then there's increased public outreach and communication, including some workshops geared at language minority communities and those in the disability community, as well as direct mailings for all voters. So in Sonoma County specifically, we have just about 304,000 registered voters right now. With a traditional polling place model, we would have had about 84% of our voters being permanent vote by mail. So moving to the Voters' Choice Act, again, now state law, it was only a 16% increase, so it didn't affect us that much. We would have had 175 to 200 polling places, 900 to 1,200 poll workers, but all for 1 day. Now we're going to be having 7 locations open for 11 days, 31 locations open total for 4 days. We'll have 21 ballot drop boxes, and we're probably looking about 250 to 400 poll workers, but we'll have them for longer because we have the longer stretches. And one of the things that kind of got us to this point was the November 2020 election. So if you all remember, we had the March election. It was a traditional election, but it was right as COVID was starting to hit, shut down like the week after that. And so we all immediately started planning for November of 2020. We knew there were going to be significant hurdles. We worked with the legislature, the governor, to try to get emergency actions allowing us to do be more flexible, really. And we were able to implement a VCA similar model. So we did not have to do the elections administration plan in order to do it this way. We didn't have to do the 11-day vote centers, and we didn't have to do the additional direct mailing. So we're sending 2 postcards to voters. We did not have to worry about that. We used grant funding from the CARES Act that was given specifically for elections, and then also for the Center for Tech and Civic Life to purchase a bunch of the equipment we needed. That was one of the hurdles with moving to this model. We needed to get for all 31 locations, mobile ballot printers. We needed at least 2 for every location. Cradle point devices, which are secured encrypted wireless access point devices, so they could connect to our voter registration system. We needed to purchase the ballot drop boxes, and then you need all the peripherals, the laptops and everything like that. That was going to be a really big ask for the county budget when it was working okay the way it was, but luckily using this funding, we were able to get that, and then we can use it going forward. So in November, we did secure 29 locations. Our office was the 30th. At that point in time, we were just under 300,000. In the run up to November, we actually went over. So that's where we were going to have 31 in this next location. We already had 3 ballot drop box. We installed 17 new ones. We mailed ballots to all our voters. We worked on enhanced outreach and voter communications. We deployed all this new hardware, did training on it, everything like that. And we had the highest turnout in California. So we were very pleased. We were watching. Marin was right behind us, so we kept watching, especially as everybody was getting close to certification, but we squeaked it out. We really did have positive feedback from voters, staff, and poll workers on the election model. People loved the ballot drop boxes and that flexibility where they were placed in the community. We had 43% of our voters returned their ballots using our drop boxes. If you remember, there were also a lot of concerns about the post office and delivering things in time. So it'll be interesting in the future to see if that trend continues. But I think a lot of people just got used to them. And so we're seeing in the smaller elections that we've had that the ballot drop boxes are very popular still. We got 36% back in mail, 8% actually came into our office. Or sorry, 8% were dropped at one of the in-person voting locations, 7% came into our office, and 6% of the voters voted in person at one of our in-person locations. Just as a comparison, for March of 2020, we had 71% of voters returned their ballots by mail. So really that kind of got split into the ballot drop boxes in the mail. But it did reduce costs because we didn't have to pay for the postage for all of those coming back. They're dropped in the ballot drop box. It's actually a little bit cheaper. We had 18% of people who voted in person in March, and then about 10% came into our office or used one of our 3 ballot drop boxes at the time. So we looked at it. We had a very positive November. We were trying to figure out, do we want to make this change going forward? And we decided we did. One of the biggest ones for us was disaster resiliency. So the top picture on the screen right now are the footprints of our previous disasters. And I will say that the majority of them happened right around election time. Luckily, we've had them happen in odd years. So Tubbs was 2017, we had Kincaid 2019. If something like this had happened at a 2016 or a 2018 or a 2020, where we have all these voters who may be evacuated from these areas, that's going to be a very big issue, especially if our polling places only have one ballot type. With the Voters' Choice Act, having the ability to print your ballot from anywhere means that a voter could be evacuated from their home and staying with a friend on the opposite side of the county. They'd still be able to go into a location, get their ballot, get it printed, and be entitled to vote on all of those races. So that was one of our major reasons for moving over. There's also enhanced fraud protection and security. We're actually looking up voter information in real time so we can see if somebody has cast a ballot or not. We can determine if they're registered, if they need to fill out a conditional voter registration. We also have fewer locations to secure. We don't have pre-printed ballots that are out there. And then we have more poll workers at each location, which gives an extra level of security. The voter choice and convenience is huge. You can choose when it's most convenient for you to vote. If you're working long hours on the weekdays, now you can go in person and vote on the weekend. If somebody forgot to register or they moved recently, they can go in and do that conditional registration in a location, you know, a week before the election and know that they were able to cast their vote. We have more public input into the elections administration plan. We had some great ideas that came forth from that. We have more voter outreach and communication, so specific funding. Again, we're doing direct mailings. We're working right now on communication plans for June and November. So that's going to include radio ads, some of the road billboard signs, and making sure that we get information out there. We also have more bilingual access because we will be able to have fewer locations and get more poll workers that speak different languages. Reduces voter challenges. So most of the provisional ballots that we see in the office are because somebody is in the wrong polling place. And so when we do that, the voter is usually upset that they have to do a provisional. There's a lot of information out there that maybe provisionals don't count, or they're not counted unless a race is close or something like that. So people get very nervous about filling out a provisional ballot. That won't be the case. They can go to any location. Operational efficiency for us, we've got fewer locations to manage, which means we will actually have the opportunity to go out in the field a little bit more. We will have fewer poll workers. Because we have less provisional ballots, we'll have faster election reconciliations and hopefully better trained poll workers because they'll be there for multiple days. It won't be something that they've been thrown into. We'll have a little bit more time to answer any questions that come up. So our transition, we went to the Board of Supervisors, requested some budgetary appropriations to move to the VCA model. That was March of 2021. We started working on the elections administration plan. You may remember that we had a very large election in September of 2021. So that kind of derailed us a little bit, slowed things down, but we did get approved by the Secretary of State in late December of 2021. So we are implementing it for the 2022 election cycle, which includes the April 12th Town of Windsor special election, June 7th, and November 8th. So when we are looking at our voting locations and drop boxes, in the state law, we have to consider 15 different criteria. So that includes population centers, language minority communities. They would like us to work with university and colleges. We want to make sure there's free parking available. There's all these different things. And so what we did is worked with our county GIS team to get information. Some of this we had, like what was historical vote by mail usage. Other information we pulled from census data and that type of thing. And this picture on the right here is a heat map of where we should focus our vote centers and drop boxes. And then, you know, some things came, like we had a vote center in Sea Ranch. It's not highlighted in red on this map, but it is a geographically isolated population. Bodega Bay is the same area, the same type of thing. So we kind of worked with what we had and what facilities were available. And we're currently working on that for June and November right now. So that's kind of the Voters' Choice Act speech. We also always get a lot of questions about other aspects of our office, the security and, you know, there's the new thing with the voter registration and voter roll maintenance, and people saying, well, you didn't have an election, you know, what have you done in the last 2 years? So we do voter registration maintenance daily. We have 3 full-time employees that is their primary job to do on a day-to-day basis. They do other things during elections, such as helping with candidate filing and proofing voter information guides. But we are getting information constantly. So we are updating voter information. We get that from voter registration paper forms. People might pick one up in the library and send one in. A lot now we get through VoteCal, which is the state registration system. So if somebody moves to Contra Costa County and registers in Contra Costa County, VoteCal will automatically send us a message and it'll cancel the voter in our system. Department of Motor Vehicles is a huge one now. As people go in and update their licenses or IDs, we get that information. We have worked with the Department of Motor Vehicles. I think it's better than it used to be. I know there were a lot of issues in the beginning. We had a huge spike in no party preference because people were unsure of how to fill out certain screens on the DMV portal. We also get information from the Postal Service. So if you tell the Postal Service that you've moved, they will give that information to us. We get death records, we get felony records, and again, other counties will give us information. And a lot of the time when people are looking, I know there's always things about like, oh, Los Angeles has more voters than they actually have citizens. Usually they're talking about the entire voter population. So that contains active, inactive, and canceled voters. So active voters are the only ones we actually will send a ballot to. And those are the only ones that can actually vote without having to give us more information. Inactive voters are in our system, you registered to vote at some point, but we've received information that you may have moved or something, but we haven't been able to verify it. So we will inactivate you, we will not send you a ballot. But if you go into one of our voting locations, if you confirm the address that we have on file, you can be activated immediately. If you've moved, you need to re-register. So the inactive people can be there for that reason. Perhaps somebody just emailed us and said, so-and-so, my father so-and-so died. We'll inactivate them so they won't receive a ballot. We do have to get confirmation of that. So that's why we get the death records, but there's usually a little bit of a delay. And canceled voters are ones that are in our system for historical purposes. And we keep them there because, well, there may be multiple reasons. Perhaps somebody's died, but we need to make sure that we can show how they voted in previous elections. With VoteCal and the statewide system, somebody may be active in Napa County, but canceled in our county because they used to be a registered voter. We can't delete them from our system because we don't want to mess with the state system. So, but they will not be mailed a ballot. They cannot vote. Another new thing that we are dealing with this year for the first time is more languages. So language designations are based on census data. And we previously had Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Khmer as our 14201 languages. So those are designated by the state, and it's where 3% or more of the voting age residents in a particular county or precinct. So some of ours were precinct levels. There were only a few precincts where we needed to provide Khmer as a language, for example. Those were section 14201 languages. They require translated facsimile ballots. So that means there's a copy of the ballot in all those languages so that they can compare it to the English version and make sure they're making the choice that they want. Those were removed earlier this year based on the census data. And I don't know if you guys saw some news articles about that. I think the Secretary of State's office got some backlash on that for kind of reducing the languages. And so they wound up reinstating them as of March 1st. Now, we had decided internally that we were going to go ahead and continue providing translated facsimile ballots in those languages. So we have that for our April election, but we were glad to see them brought back. We were glad that we went along that path because we actually, it would have been too late getting the information on March 1st to do that for our April election. And then there's federal designation. Section 203 is the federal code, and that's more than 5% of voting age citizens are members of a single language minority group and do not speak or understand English adequately enough to participate in the electoral process. So we were designated bilingual starting this year. So going forward, all of our election materials and all of our ballots will have both English and Spanish on them. We also are required to have bilingual poll workers. And then because we do have a gap in available poll workers and what we need to do, the Secretary of State has a contract that they let all the counties use for phone translation services. So we have that available actually pretty much in all languages, not just our designated languages, at all of our vote centers. So our poll workers can call up on a speakerphone and have a translator come in for a bunch of different languages to make sure that people have access. We also get a lot of questions about accessibility. So we do survey all of our locations for accessibility to make sure that everyone has equal access. We do this every couple years, just in case people have changed, put in new steps or new doors or something like that. And we can do mitigation measures. So for perhaps there's not a handicapped parking spot, we have signs that we can put up to create a van accessible parking spot and allow us to use a location. We also have accessible ballot marking devices at all of our locations. We have a minimum of 3. and it allows everyone the same opportunity to cast a ballot. So it does print out a paper ballot. No results are stored or tracked in the machine. It is a touch screen, but there's also an audio tactical interface, headphones, and plugs for paddles or sip and puff devices. And that is, the device was basically designed in collaboration with accessibility groups to make sure that if somebody is blind, if somebody is paralyzed, if they use a wheelchair and a sip and puff device, that they would have the ability to cast their ballot, make their ballot choice in secret, just like everybody else. We also have remote accessible vote by mail, which again is not electronic voting. That is where we will email you a secure link, and you can use your personal computer to privately mark your ballot and then print out a paper copy. We still need that paper copy. We need envelopes to come back to our office with a signature. And then of course there's postage paid envelopes now. So nobody has to pay in order to cast a vote. System security is a big hot topic right now. So we like to remind everybody that systems must be certified by the Secretary of State. There's only a few actual ballot counting systems that are certified. It's a very intensive process. It requires applications, technical documentations. They have to give all the source code over to the Secretary of State. They do hardware testing, software testing. And then when they authorize, when we enter into an agreement with an election system, the program is given to us by the Secretary of State, not the vendor. It is a handoff, a physical handoff. So that's not, it's not something that can be tampered with after the Secretary of State approves it. The ballot counting software is not connected to the internet. We have a secure room that has badge access and security cameras in it. We don't even allow the janitors in there. So we monitor everybody who comes in and out. And of course, the ballot security. We do have paper ballots. So everything in California, there is a paper record for it. Voting by mail, there's confusion sometimes that everybody's receiving a ballot, that we just send them out indiscriminately. We send one ballot per active registered voter. We check that envelope signature against that particular voter's registration signature. If there's not a match, we send a letter notifying the voter now, allowing them time to cure the signature, because we do understand signatures change. And the envelopes remain sealed until the signature is good and the ballot is ready to be counted. So if somebody forgets to sign their ballot or it's not a match, that ballot never comes out. It never has the opportunity to get mingled in with other ballots. And sometimes we will send replacement ballots. Maybe you didn't receive yours or something like that. When we do, the other ballot is automatically voided in our system. So if you send that other ballot back, it bounces out because it is showing as void. That is what we will see with the Voters' Choice Act model when people are voting live. Everybody received a vote by mail ballot. If you go in and vote in person, when we issue you a ballot, it's going to avoid previous ballots that were sent to you in the mail. So we don't have to worry about you sending that in. Chain of custody, ballots are never alone with people. So there's always teams walking them to different areas. We keep logs of the ballot numbers, of the locations of the people. So when we pick up ballot envelopes from our drop boxes, they're done in teams, they're logged, they're checked, double checked when we get back to the office and everything like that. We also have locks on and seals on all of our equipment that are verified by multiple people. Specific numbers are used, and then the poll workers have to verify those. That's for the prevention of tampering. We also do reconciliations in our office, verifying the counts of ballots versus the people voting. And we also have adjudication. So if somebody has marked a ballot and the software is unsure how they voted, the humans will check it. So we will do the adjudication and say, yes, the intent of this voter was to vote for person A. And of course, one of the biggest things is all the other audits and checks that we do. Everything is public, so we can have observers at all of our locations. I think September of 2021, this last recall election was probably one of the most observed elections that we've ever seen. We actually had people in our office a lot of the time. And it was great. We got to explain what we do, explain the systems that we have, the protections that we have in place. We also have logic and accuracy testing. So this is done prior to any counting of the ballots. And we try to bring in members of the public. We usually invite the members of the political parties if they want to join us for that. But they are doing a check on the counting machines to make sure that A, it's tabulating everything correctly, and B, it's capturing every mark. So we will have test ballots that are marked to make sure that everything, all the reports come up correctly. We also have the 1% manual tally, which is a manual check of ballots in a precinct or a batch to make sure that it matches with the computer results. We start with 1% that's chosen at random, and then we have to add additional ones to capture every contest. So if we choose a couple of precincts and we get most of the ballots, for instance, coming up in June, we're going to have one measure, and that is Kenwood School District. So one of those precincts is going to have to include ballots from Kenwood because we need to make sure that those ones are tabulated correctly. And then risk limiting audits, we're actually going to be doing that for the first time this year. So that's, we manually will tally randomly selected ballots, and we will stop when it is implausible that a full recount would show a different result than the ballots reviewed. So the closer the contest, the more ballots we're going to have to review. And then of course there's voter participation history. So every voter is given a record, and you are able to see that people have or have not voted in the past. We do have people purchase that data in order to look at it. And you can check yourself to see if you have a vote recorded personally. And I talked very fast, so apologize if I talk too fast. Does anybody have any questions? I'll stop sharing here. All right, is it okay if I go ahead and call on people?
Sure. We were going to use the chat, but
okay.
you can certainly call on people if they have their hand raised. We have time.
Okay. I do see a question in the chat. Do we get notified when someone gets a death certificate? Yes. So we do get notified by the state. We get the vital records, and we can mark people off. But we do appreciate people notifying us, because sometimes perhaps somebody is registered as Ray Smith and the death certificate says Raymond Smith, or maybe there was a misprint on when somebody registered, maybe their birth date is a day off or something like that. We'll inactivate them because we're pretty sure this is that voter, but we can't confirm. We don't like to cancel people unless we can confirm it. That's where usually we can do that with the death records, because they have Social Security and the birth dates and everything. Another question, somebody's worked at polling places in the past. When will info come out to me for the June election? That should be getting sent out right now. So we have been waiting. We were trying to work with our human resources department because it's a little different with 4 days and 11 days versus one long day. And so right now we pay a stipend. We were trying to figure out if that was the best way to go. If so, should we increase the stipend for election day because it's a longer day? Should it be hourly, which really meets the county's kind of living wage type of thing? We're still working on that. We will probably not have it. That's been one of the delays. We just found out we will definitely not have an answer before June. I will probably be going to the Board of Supervisors and asking for an increase in the stipend while we work with Human Resources to get a permanent solution going forward. Another question, do you anticipate that the Voters' Choice Act will reduce the cost of conducting elections with less poll workers and ballot locations, or costs just spread differently? In the short term, we expect it to raise costs because we have more direct mailings. We're paying for locations for longer time periods. And again, we are trying to work to see what we can do in terms of the poll worker pay, but that will probably be more because they're for longer periods of time, less people, more time. So that's kind of where we're going. That's what we've seen in other counties, is that there has been an increase. When we went to the board, we asked for that in our budget because we did understand that was part of it. We think in the long term, it will reduce costs, especially as people get used to it. The 2 direct mailings, some counties have already started talking about asking for legislation to stop that after like maybe 4 even year elections, when people are pretty much familiar with the new model, but keeping it for when people are transitioning. We have a large homeless population, and you have a PO box for mail. How can they vote? You do not need an address, a street address, to register to vote. We need a location. That could be a cross street. We do need a physical location because we need to make sure that people are in the right precinct. So in order to precinct people, we do need to know it's this cross street or something like that. We can mail them to a PO box without a problem, but we do have to have a physical area of residence. One of the things that has changed in the last couple of years, it used to be it had to be a residence address. So home could not be a business. Now you can use a business address if you are also living there. So what I think it was mainly, I think San Francisco was the driver for it, where there were a lot of people that could not afford to live in San Francisco in an actual house, but they had a business and there's like a little room on it where they had a bed and a microwave. And so that's really where they lived. But by the election laws, that's not a residence. So you couldn't live there. So they relaxed it to kind of make sure that people who were living at a business would also be able to vote where they lived. So. Press Democrat recently had an article about threats to those overseeing election balloting. Has anyone in Sonoma County reported that? I will say that there was a lot of heated rhetoric around the November election and around the September election as well. We did get, I would say in Sonoma County, more implicit threats more than anything else. We had somebody on the phone tell our chief deputy, you know, well, you better be aware that I have guns. And so, you know, not saying I'm going to come shoot you, but really, really making a threat. We have a really great statewide association and really great communication. And so one of the things that was coming out was other counties were reporting incidents. So we have open lines of communications to FBI, Homeland Security, those types of agencies that are all taking this type of thing very seriously. I feel, got really lucky in Sonoma County. You know, we are not a swing state. And so I feel like there wasn't as much rhetoric. but there were counties in California where poll workers returning ballots the night of the election were chased by people, almost run off the road because they were being observed. And it was a very aggressive observing. Again, we got really lucky. I hope that continues, but it is something that we're monitoring. So. Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much, Diva. That was wonderful and full of information and updates and all that. So appreciate your time and your
Well, before you
efforts.
hang up, Ty, can I just make a comment? I know years ago, somebody didn't get to vote because his signature had changed. And people need to go back and just make sure they're because for what I wrote when I was 20, what I'm writing now when I'm 77, and my husband got Alzheimer's, but he still knew he wanted to vote. So I just took him down to your office and they watched him sign because his signature didn't look anything like what it did when he was younger. He got mad because he thought it did, but it didn't. So I just had him sign in front of one of your people and that took care of it.
Well, and the other great thing is that a lot of people don't know when we're checking signatures. So the first thing we check is what was your most recent registration. If it doesn't match, we actually have another box that we pop up. Oops, sorry. And it has all the signatures that we've received. So all your vote by mail signatures that you've sent in over the years, any forms that you've sent back to us. If you sent your signature, we've captured that. And so there are cases where we will look at a signature and be like, ooh, that is not a match. But then when you open it and you see the progression through the years as their signature, somebody's getting older and their signature gets shakier and shakier, and you can make a clear line between all those signatures, then we will go, oh yeah, it matches. So that's another resource that we have. So
And the last time I voted, I didn't know where to put my middle name, and he pulled it up and he saw that I put it in the same place on the last place I voted. So he said, yeah, we would have taken this. So I guess they kind of do detective work.
and middle names are one of those things people often sit there and go, did I sign with my middle name? Did I not sign with my middle name? That is one thing. If you don't sign with it, but everything else matches, we're not going to reject it because you forgot to put your middle name in. If you do put it in, but we can see that the first and the last, we will be able to count that as well. So it is definitely more investigative.
Well, there's really not enough room for the middle name. So.
Depends on how big your signature is.
Yes. As long as you don't have to put your title, Diva, you're okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did see another question. Due to COVID, people were having to wear masks. One family refused and got kind of aggressive about that. One of the things that we try to be clear on is that try to get people in and out as quickly as possible. But the state was pretty clear about the right to vote trumps all the other stuff. So we can offer them things like voting outside, but really they have the right to vote. If they want to vote in person, they get to vote in person. Right now, it seems like things are dying down and there aren't, the county's not requiring masking anymore for vaccinated or unvaccinated people. So my guess is that we will not be requiring it in the future. But that, of course, is subject to change. As we all know, we might get a health order tomorrow and it's like, never mind, forget everything I said, back to mask wearing. So we will hopefully be able to adapt those types of things quickly. But right now it seems like it's kind of waning.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to say let's wrap up here and let the League of Women Voters give us their presentations, which are, again, on the national level. So I believe Debbie McKay is going to be starting for the League of Women Voters.
Yes, thank you very much for having us here today. And I'm always really up for a talk by Diva. She is so clear and gives you such a good perspective on what's going on locally. So we're going to move to more of a federal perspective. We're very fortunate in Sonoma County that we have, excellent procedures. We have it well thought out, but unfortunately, that's not true in everywhere in America. And I'm going to do a share screen, and I'm going to be talking about the Voting Rights Act. So I think probably most people here are familiar with the Voting Rights Act that happened in 1965. And we've had a lot of really wonderful things that happened after that. Some people even say that 1965 is when we really became a democracy, because that's really when everybody, including people of color, were able to vote. And we've had a long journey since then, and unfortunately, the journey is headed towards voter suppression. Voting really is one of the most important things we do in democracy. It's a cornerstone of democracy for us to be able to elect our leaders. And unfortunately, not everybody feels that way in America right now. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was really important because it prohibited racial discrimination in voting. And it was actually one of the most far-reaching pieces of civil rights legislation that we've ever had in our U.S. history. It secured the right to vote for racial minorities throughout the country, but it was particularly targeting the South because there had been a lot of overt racism in the South. And the other amazing part, it was really bipartisan once it was passed. It was reauthorized 6 times with bipartisan approval, including most recently in 2006. But a lot has changed since then. Now, when it was passed, it massively increased voter turnout and voter registration, particularly among Black people and particularly in the South. Nearly 1 million Black voters were registered within 4 years of its passage. And over 50% of the Black voting age population in every Southern state registered to vote. And the number of Black elected officials in the South more than doubled. In fact, right now in our Congress, 13% of our congressmen are Black, and that reflects the population of the United States, which is 13% Black. So it really made a difference in our country for people of color. But it's been eroded since then. So you've probably heard of the Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder court case that was decided by the Supreme Court in June of 2013. It was a very close vote. It was 5-4, but they voted to invalidate a couple of very important sections of the 1965 Voter Rights Act. So Section 4B contained a formula that was used to determine what jurisdictions needed federal permission before they changed their voting laws. And this was primarily states in the South. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court declared that Section 4B was unconstitutional because it was based on a 40-year-old set of data. Well, that's because that was the data used to pass that legislation. And because they had to get federal permission before they changed their voting laws, we didn't have the kind of voter suppression that led to this law being passed. So it's kind of a catch-22. The court also overturned Section 5, which requires certain states and local governments to obtain permission, and that's permission actually from the U.S. Department of Justice before implementing new voting laws. So this is a real blow to the Voting Rights Act, and we still haven't recovered from it. And unfortunately, that data wasn't so out of date because within 24 hours of the Supreme Court's decision, Texas announced it would implement stricter voting ID laws. Alabama passed a voter ID law. They closed polling places in counties predominantly with Black voters, and they purged hundreds of thousands of people from the voter rolls without notifying people. 2 other states, Mississippi and Alabama, enforced stricter voter ID laws that had previously been barred by the federal pre-clearance process. So you can see that the Supreme Court was wrong, basically. There was still a lot of discrimination. there was still a lot of support for voter suppression throughout the United States. Between January 1st of just last year, January 1st and July of 2021, many states enacted voter restrictions and made it much harder for people to vote. And this has not just had an impact on Black voters. It's had a broader impact than that I'm going to talk about in a minute. If you want the real full story of all the impacts of that Shelby versus Holder ruling, there's a really good blog on the University of Alabama Institute of Human Rights. And I know it's a long website address here, but you know, when we do the YouTube video, you can go back and copy that down, or just Google it. It's the University of Alabama Institute of Human Rights, and it'll really give you a detailed impact of that court case and what it's done. So it's affected far more than just people of color. It's affected aged Americans, disabled Americans, low-income voters, working people, and youth. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how. Some of the greater impacts on low-income and disabled people is there's a lot tougher criteria in many states for getting a mail ballot. You just heard about how in California, everyone is going to get a mail ballot. And, you know, those really get used by people who are low-income and disabled because they frequently don't have a car or don't have transportation. They don't have a way to get to a polling place. And the other really nasty thing they've done is they're requiring in some states notarized signatures on mail ballots. Now, I don't know about you, but if I look at something and it has to be notarized, I kind of groan. That's going to be inconvenient. It's going to cost me money. I'm probably going to have to make an appointment. Well, if you're low income and you're disabled, that in itself may keep you from being able to vote. If you have to get a notarized signature on a mail ballot, you just may not be able to do that. And reducing days for advance voting also disproportionately affects low-income people because they have a hard time getting a day off from work a lot of times to go vote. So if there's no weekend or Sunday voting, things like that, it may be really difficult for them to be able to go and vote. It also has a greater impact on working people, particularly the elimination of voting on Sundays. So some states are doing away with, they had advanced days to vote, but they're doing away with voting on Sundays. They're doing shorter voting hours. They're doing fewer polling locations, but they're not adding drop boxes. They're actually reducing the number of drop boxes. So you've seen on TV, you've seen those long lines of people waiting to vote. This is why. It's because they're reducing the number of voting locations. People have to go longer distances. There's fewer drop boxes. In some states, they might only have one drop box per county. Can you imagine if we had one drop box in Sonoma County, as big a county as we are? And they're reducing the number of days for advance voting. All of that really makes it tougher for people who work, especially people in essential professions, to go and vote. But they haven't stopped there. They're also doing things that have greater impact on our youth. So it used to be that a college photo ID was okay to register to vote for the first time. But a lot of states are saying, oh, no, that's not going to be good anymore. We won't accept those anymore. They're also restricting college students to not being able to vote on campus. No, you're going to have to go home to vote, and we won't give you a mail ballot. So if you want to vote, you're going to actually have to go home at the time of the election, go to a polling place, and cast your ballot. Well, how often do you think that's going to work for people? The greatest impact of eliminating voting on Sundays is for Black voters because they have a tradition called polls to the polls, where frequently Black churches will have a potluck or some kind of celebration on a Sunday, and afterwards they load people into buses and they take them to their surrounding polling places. So it helps people who are aged, who are infirm, who don't have transportation, and it's kind of a party. They kind of make voting a party. And if you eliminate voting on Sundays, that goes away. And they know very well when they've eliminated Sunday voting, they know very well the effect it's going to have. They've also created, as we mentioned before, tougher criteria for getting mail ballots. And they know that has a disparate impact on Black voters because you can look at the voting records and far more Black voters in the past over history have used mail-in ballots than white voters. Now that may be changing with our changing habits of everybody getting a mail ballot, but at least historically it's been used more by Black voters. So how do we fix all this? We can't leave it up to the states, unfortunately, because there are too many legislatures that are passing this kind of harmful legislation. I think the latest figure I heard is that 19 states in the past year have tried to pass over 30 voter suppression laws. So this is a rampant disease in our country right now. So at the national level, there's been a big push for passing a lot of legislation that would fix the flaws that got created by the Supreme Court ruling in the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And it's been combined, the legislation's been combined into an act called the Voting Rights and John R. Lewis Act. Now, probably most of you know who John R. Lewis was, but in case you don't, he was a civil rights activist going all the way back to the 60s, worked a lot, really spent his lifetime working on civil rights, as well as being a congressman and representing his state. And unfortunately, this legislation, which is actually excellent, is unlikely to pass this year. We all know how far apart we are on agreeing on how to move forward in this country right now. The parties are just fighting each other like crazy, and it's very hard to get anything passed right now, which leaves us with lawsuits as the answer. So unfortunately, that's how we're fighting voter suppression right now. The League is very active in fighting voter suppression in the states where it's taking place, and we work with places like the Brennan Law Center, the ACLU. We work with other organizations to fight it, and we're going to have to continue, though, to work for legislation, because that's really what will solve this in the long run. But in the short term, lawsuits are what we have right now. So why is this happening? You know, we've heard there's rampant fraud in the United States, right? So we got to pass all these new laws so we can stop this rampant fraud that's happening. Well, that's not quite the case, because in 2020, more than 161 million voters cast ballots that were counted. And the Heritage Foundation, which is a pretty well-respected foundation that does a lot of research, did a report on election fraud for 2020. In the US, they found only 1,340 verified cases of voter fraud. So voter fraud is not the problem that we're trying to cure here. And then we hear about elections being stolen. So are outside governments coming in and through the internet, are they changing all the ballots? Are they stealing our elections? Or is some other nefarious group stealing our elections? Well, that doesn't appear to be the case either, because there's several agencies that are responsible for making sure our elections are secure. And they issued a statement in 2020 regarding the November 3rd election for 2020, that this actually was the most secure election in our American history. So we're kind of got a solution in search of a problem. Our elections are secure. Our elections are not full of fraud. And what we really need to be doing is having elections more like California. I mean, you just heard from Diva about all the advances that California is making. And that's what states should be replicating. We should actually be making it easier for our citizens to vote, because that's what democracy is based on, is everyone voting, everyone participating, everyone picking their leaders. And the role of us as citizens is to become informed voters and to vote in every election. That's our responsibility in democracy. We need more counties like Sonoma County, where they are a model of how we should do elections. And that model pays off. I don't think Diva mentioned this when she did her talk, but 90.6% of Sonoma County voters voted in the 2020 election. That was the highest vote in all of California. So it works. It works to give voters easy access to the ballots. And you've heard from her all the security measures that they put in place to make sure there's no fraud and make sure nobody's stealing ballots. So what can you do? What can you do as an individual to try to make this better? Well, one thing you can do is volunteer to be a poll worker, which I hear some of you do. Be a poll worker. If you can't be a poll worker, be a poll observer. You know, make sure that everybody is getting their right to vote and facilitate that process. If you're a working person, then some employers will actually let you take time off to be a poll worker or be a poll observer. If you're retired, maybe make that a priority in the next election. And support organizations all that are already working to protect voting rights, such as your own organization. The AAUW definitely has voting rights as a priority. Obviously, the League of Women Voters, we exist to support people having the right to vote and being educated voters. That's our primary mission. Some of the information I presented today came from the Brennan Center for Justice. They do a lot of research about voting, and they're a really good resource. So educate yourself about what is going on. And the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, is another group that works really hard and does participate in lawsuits to try to stop the voter suppression that's going on. They're all throughout the United States, and we have partnered as a national organization with them to stop some of these really horrendous violations of people's voting rights they're trying to put forward now. You can get the latest information on elections and voting laws from several sources. The Brennan Center has a recent report on what's happening with all these voter suppression laws. Their most recent report, I believe, is this February report in 2022. They also have ideas about how we can protect our elections infrastructure. And what part of what's happened nationally on that is almost all the elections now have paper records. So in all the different states, the various attorney generals or whoever in that state is responsible for elections, they are making sure there are paper records so that we can do recounts and we can make sure that nobody has, violated our election system. If you want to know more about how we keep our elections secure, there's a website about election cybersecurity where you can learn more about what our government does in general to keep our elections safe. And you can also go to the League's national website, and they have some information about how we can expand voter access. So become informed. And once you're informed, talk to your family, talk to your friends. If you just even remember one thing that you heard today and you share it with another person, you're helping to spread the truth. You're helping to spread correct information. If you're savvy on social media, share one fact you learned today. Talk to your children. Talk to your grandchildren. Part of how we make this work is for everybody to have facts and for everybody to be informed. And don't give up on the federal legislation. We've sort of hit an impasse right now, but when Karen comes up and talks to you, she's going to talk about some new legislation that has a chance of passing. But don't give up on the John Lewis Act. Don't give up on us finding a solution at the federal level. We need to keep fighting for that. And if you want to stay up on the latest news, we invite you to sign up for our League's newsletter. You can go to our website and sign up for that. We certainly would love to have any of you be a member, but it's not required to get our newsletter. And we also have a great website when you get close to the election and you want to take a look at your sample ballot, or you want to hear about the candidates, or you want to hear about propositions. We have impartial, nonpartisan information at votersedge.org, California. And it's a great tool, again, to tell your family and friends about, where they can get impartial information about elections. And when you go to vote, get together with friends, talk, educate yourselves. Our power lies in our vote. Our vote is our voice, and we need to exercise it, and we need to hold on to that. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I know I talk quickly. I'm going to hold questions until Karen's had a chance to present, and then maybe you can ask either one of us any questions you might have.
Okay, it's my turn, and Eva and Debbie are a very hard act to follow, so I'm in an unenviable position. But I do want to share some slightly good news about some new legislation that's coming. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Okay, here we are. So the Electoral Count Modernization Act of 2022. I had no idea really what the Electoral Count Act was until January 6, 2021, and what happened that day in Congress. So the Electoral Count Act was passed in 1887. It lays out how Congress will count each state's electoral votes. And each state, when I say each state, I mean each state and District of Columbia. So just want to clarify that. So each state and DC submits a certificate of ascertainment, which is opened during the joint session of Congress on January 6th. Congress then will count, certify, and finalize the vote at that time. Under the 1887 Act, the results could be contested if only one member of the Senate and one member of the House would object. And if there was an objection, a debate and vote would occur. So in 2021, objections were raised in 6 different states. Only 2 states had support from a member in each body, and those states were Arizona and Pennsylvania, which I'm sure you all remember. There were a total of 147 legislators that objected at that time. So what happened after January 26th, and then as Debbie talked about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, when that did not pass, a bipartisan group came up with the idea of a way to update and reform the 1887 Act. So on February 1st, the bill was introduced by Senators Angus King, Amy Klobuchar, and Dick Durbin. There was bipartisan support on this, and it seems really right now to be the only hope for some changes in our system that can help prevent another January 6th from happening. So within the Electoral Count Modernization Act, there are a variety of reforms, and they include increasing the threshold for objections from one from the Senate and one from the House to 1/3 of each body. So you'd need to get more folks on board to raise those objections. It also removes the vice president as the presiding officer and putting in the Senate pro tem as the presiding officer. Right now, that position is held by Senator Leahy. And what that would do is the vice president would then just have that ceremonial role of gaveling in and gaveling out the meeting. If the Senate pro tem was on the ballot as either president or vice president, it would then, the presiding officer would then move to the next most senior person in the majority party. So there wouldn't be a vested interest in somebody acting as a presiding officer. There'd be 2 new timelines for certifications. And that has to do with the 20th of December would be the new time that any recounts would have to occur by. And so that would help with some of the time delays. It also would narrow the state's abilities to appoint electors after Election Day, which I didn't realize they could till I was doing this research. Unfortunately, this act would not make any changes to any state laws that we talked about. So reforms also would include clarifying that the state's governor must be the one to certify the names of the electors. As it stands now, other officials can do that. It would clarify that mail-in ballots can be counted before, during, or after Election Day. It would provide grounds for Congress to object to electors or electoral votes submitted by states. It would raise the threshold to sustain an objection to states' electors to 3/5 of the members. So that's it in a nutshell for me. There's more to come in this process. It hasn't had any real committee hearings yet. I like to look at the glass half full, and to me, this is a glass half full moment for us in this act. If you are interested in encouraging others to vote, I know a lot of you have participated in Vote Forward, and so I'd like to also put a plug in for that. For those of you who don't know about Vote Forward, it's a nonprofit organization that encourages people to get out to vote, and there's usually a postcard writing campaign around elections for that. So, like I said, I was going to do short and sweet, and I did. So, anyway, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. But there we are. And I know I talked real fast, but that's me.
There we go. Thank you so much, Karen. That was wonderful. And yes, we will go with the glass half full, because that is some progress that could be made. The only question I see in chat right now is the spelling of the Brennan Center. Is it 2 N's? BRENN?
Yes, it's 2 N's. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else have any questions for the League of Women Voters entered in the chat? Or just raise your hand, I guess. Okay, well, it's been
I was typing it in, but I can't type that now. Basically, Karen Weeks, you didn't write this, but I mean, if you put the governor in charge, doesn't that politicize even more the situation? Because the majority of governors in this country happen to be Republican right now. So if they get to pick the electors, I don't think that's an improvement. So.
Well, it's that they would certify the names of the electors. So I think that's a difference. So.
Okay. That's all.
Yeah.
Myself.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I just really want to thank our presenters, and I learned quite a bit here. I've been following the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and I've been so discouraged. Well, angry, honestly. But so it was just really nice to kind of have some more information and some other ways to look at things and get involved. And I want to thank each of our presenters for that. It was a wonderful presentation today. So thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much. Do I hear another voice?
I have one question. What can we do, just us? What can we do to just facilitate fairness?
Well,
So can I answer that a minute?
Please.
I think that we shouldn't give up on improving the Voting Rights Act. So I realize that this comprehensive legislation didn't pass, but your representatives need to hear from you. Your senators, your congressmen need to hear from you that you're not okay with the fact that no legislation has passed to kind of cure this problem created by the Supreme Court. I think we have a lot of evidence about the voter suppression that's going on. So that's why I encourage people to kind of go to the website of the Brennan Center and other things and educate yourself, because then you can give specific examples if you write call or email your representatives to say, well, I realize this didn't pass, but we still need to have this fixed. So maybe it's less comprehensive legislation. Maybe it's passing what's possible right now and what feels impossible later. So don't give up on the John Lewis Act provisions. Maybe that act itself will not pass, but we could still have new legislation introduced that would still address some of those problems that are there. So, I mean, what the people who want to do voter suppression want most is for us to give up. So don't give up and keep plugging away at this. We kind of have to be the squeaky wheels, you know, before we're going to get oiled. So don't give up and educate your friends and family. Encourage them to write a postcard. You know, we have to keep talking about this. We have to keep the dialogue going about this. You know, think about how long it took women to get the right to vote. They worked on it for 70 years. I mean, that's some perseverance. I'm hoping this won't take 70 years, but we need to not give up on preserving voting rights. It's a fundamental foundation of our democracy. So we can't just give up because we didn't get this particular piece of legislation through. So please do not fall into despair and think about what you personally can do in small pieces.
I'm going to just piggyback on that. So with AAUW, our national organization is basically, of course, encouraging people to reach out to their legislators, have you encourage senators to change the Senate rules such that some of these voting bills can pass. On the AAUW.org website, there's like 3 main buttons, and one is take action, and you can immediately get into what we've called 2-minute activist. So you can find voting initiative, voting, you know, make your comments, and you just put in your zip code and it's got your legislator, it sends that message for you. So literally in 2 minutes, you can do this, because usually the problem is, oh, now what address, where am I sending this, what's the email? And so they will continue to be updating. Again, it's AUW.org, 2-minute activist, and you do not have to be a member of AUW to do this. They'll ask for your email address, but you do not have to join AUW formally. There's just a main button that says take action, and then you can click through the policies and get to voting, and you can enter in the 2-minute activist. So for our members, we still have Lobby Day coming up in April, and that covers lots of issues. Voting would be one of them, I hope. And one last thing would be, like Debbie was saying, you know, if you've learned one thing today, maybe it's time to share it with friends and family that live in those restrictive states. Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, you know, if you have friends there, maybe share this and or encourage them. Why don't you check out the local website of your League of Women Voters? Why don't you check out AAUW.org, you know, or your AAUW branches? So I think, again, by showing support and acknowledging the seriousness of it, and that everyone should be involved and have an opinion, that's part of what we can do, is encourage people to think through this more thoroughly. So so that's where we stand. So but what a terrific program. Thank you so much for your
we have a couple of, Leona has a question and I have a comment to finish up with.
Go for it.
So
Well,
Leona?
I actually had a comment also. I wanted to piggyback off of what Karen Week said about Vote Forward. It's a national organization. So many of us, I think, feel blessed being in California, and particularly Sonoma County, with how expanded our voting opportunities are. So if you're feeling a little discouraged about how to help other states, go to Vote Forward, and you can get involved in a letter writing campaign that really targets those states that are have voter suppression.
Thanks, Leona. And I did want to mention, re-mention that this will be on the League's YouTube site in a couple days. And also, if people would like their PowerPoint, copies of the PowerPoint today, should they contact you, Ty, or how would you like that to
Yes,
occur?
yeah. They can contact me. We will see how we can do that. So
Okay.
we will discuss that after the fact, but yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks for asking us to participate.
Yes, yes. Couldn't have done it without you. Yes. Well, thank
Yeah,
you,
and
everyone.
We're happy to partner in the future at whenever you feel it's appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
We
Well,
really
we'll
like your
definitely be
organization.
we'll be doing voting week together in September. I'm sure we'll get some going there. So wonderful. Well, thank you all, ladies. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and appreciate your participation.
Thank you.